The European International Championships in London has concluded, and we saw a variety of decks see success. Winning first place, surprisingly, was Mega Absol, and we saw Gholdengo, one of the top decks in the format, come second place. There was a couple other highlights, such as Makani Tran being the highest place in Gardevoir, Liam Halliburton continuing to see success with Zoroark, and Oscar Madsen continuing to innovate the metagame with Dragapult Charizard with an Acerola tech. I'm Zach Lesage. I'm a Pokemon TCG YouTuber, and I cover the metagame, decks, and more. In this video, I'm going to be showcasing the best decks, kind of what happened at EUIC, and if you're attending future tournaments such as Seattle, Puerto Rico, anything else coming up, that metagame might adjust based off of these results. So stay tuned for the channel, give this video a like, share, subscribe, and let us know exactly what you think the metagame is going to be, what deck you're running right now. Just comment anyways. So I do want to start off, this is the page. I'm going to put this in the description of the video. And right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my camera so we can see all of the Pokemon information. Sorry, sponsors, you're going away too. Now we can see the whole page. You can see that there was a lot of players. We had 4,010 players who played in this event. So if we go over to the statistics, we can see that Dragapult was the most popular deck day one. I think that information, usually they go somewhere, maybe it's on their Limitless Labs, but Dragapult, Gardevoir, Gholdengo, Charizard are the top four. Mega Absol boxes really jumped into the top five, probably due to the popularity of Tord Reklev, winning the Las Vegas Regionals. We saw Mega Absol box do well at the recent Sydney Regionals. And of course, Marnie's Grimmsnarl makes sense that it's up there. We just had the win in Merida with Rabgir, Sunny. So Raging Bolt, again, you can see the popular decks, and then it kind of falls off of the face of the metagame. So pretty standard for the metagame, nothing crazy out there. Even the decks that are above 5%, Marnie's Mega, Charizard, Gholdengo, Gardevoir, Dragapult, really makes sense to be the absolute top best decks. If we look into the deck list that we have here, or if we look into the results, we can see that Edwin was able to win. This card was basically Tim Danklin's list from Sydney, except they swapped the second Toedscool to basically the second right Toedscool. I like that anyways. Maybe going the 1-1 split's fine, because I think the other one might be weak to grass, which could have some properties when it comes to Badoo hitting you, you could hit back. Regardless, Toedscool is going to be for the Gholdengo matchup, more or less. And Mega Absol is going to be using Claw of Darkness, ripping cards from your opponent's hand. You can use Monkey Dories, Adrenabrain, moving damage counters to your opponent's Pokemon, and of course using Terminal Period to knock them out. So this deck functions as a big basic deck that has a couple interesting attacks that ends up playing as a pseudo control deck. I think this list, seeing getting the win is cool. Do I think that it's something that could have happened if we played EUIC again? No, I think we probably would not see Mega Absol win the tournament again. However, I do think Mega Absol does have a newfound light and respect, and the deck does kind of move up into its playability. That being said, I think we'll see more Mega Absols going forward. It just won EUIC, so if you're expecting a Mega Absol list, this is exactly the 60 that I'd really expect. If we go into the archetype of players who've played this deck and seeing where it did, we have Daichi, who also made top 4. Lucas Zing's a great player as well. And we had Tord Reklev, who played the exact same list as Las Vegas. So we might see a Cornerstone build. That's possible. We could see the Toedscool build, or we could see something in between that plays neither. But I do think that most players are going to be Edwin won, Edwin played the best deck. However, I do want to note there are some quite strong players who played this deck. We do have Edwin, we have Daichi seeing top 8, Lucas, Tord, James Cox, Carter, Brennan, Hunter Smith, Natalie Millar. Those are players that are very familiar names to me. Not trying to skip over anyone or any disrespect there, but those are some pretty big names and some players who advanced really far into the tournament. So I do think that like we're going to see a lot more Absol box going up. So if your deck has a tough Absol box matchup, definitely something to consider. And if you're considering playing it, you do have a lot of reference points of players that you may respect or disrespect, regardless however it goes. There's a lot of content out there regarding the deck. We saw Drew Stevenson continue to see his absolute reign of Gholdengo, kind of proving that Secret Box is probably the best way to play this deck. We've seen it very recently where Josh Frank was the top performing Gholdengo player in Merida Regionals playing Secret Box. I mean, Gabriel Smart did play the Prime Catcher version when it came to Sydney Regionals. So I think like really the big toss-up is Secret Box or Prime Catcher, with Secret Box probably edging itself out with a second place finish. Now I do think that Drew's finish is slightly more important than Edwin's, for the reason that Gholdengo is probably the easier deck to hop behind the driver's seat. Gholdengo is all about making it rain, choosing the right amount of energies in your hand, which is like kind of like Raging Bolt in a lot of ways. Players really like these big, easy, quick damage decks more than these intricate monkey dory moving damage, grabbing cards from your opponent's hand. Sure, different players might have differing opinions, but when we're looking at the masses, there's a reason why decks like Gholdengo and Dragapult Dusknoir are a little bit more popular. They're easygoing decks, TV dinner-like instructions where it's like, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Now, that's not to undercut the intricacies of these decks. I think that Drew played absolutely fantastic, and Dragapult Dusknoir is one of the most difficult decks to play when it comes to playing it to the utmost skill level. However, if you're playing it at a fairly new entry level, the deck is like Badoo turn 1, Evolve turn 2, attack with Dragapult turn 3. Gholdengo is attack with Zoroark, attack with Gholdengo, attack, 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 right? So I think that we're going to see more Gholdengo see play than any other deck. I think we're going to see Dragapult Dusknoir and Gholdengo be the top 2 played decks. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Mega Absol being played as the third most deck. And lists are probably going to be very similar to Drew Stevenson's list. Now, when it comes to Gholdengo, there's also a lot of reference points when it comes down to it. Gholdengo here, we can see that there's Drew Stevenson who played the deck, Josh Frank who played the deck, and it goes down further because like there's a lot of other players who did play the deck as well. We can see Owen Cameraman. We can see, I mean, it goes down a little bit more, but you can see that there's a lot of players. Gabriel Smart is another one. It goes down, and a lot of players who made here are getting their first day 2s, or maybe they're not as frequent as making day 2s or making it as far into the tournament. I think that Gholdengo is really that deck that can allow players to kind of make a mistake here or there and just draw into the right pieces with Lunar Cycle. Maybe that's one of the reasons that I like it, is the deck can sometimes be forgiving. In the same sentence, you could also start with a handful of counter catchers and Professor Turos, and it's really not what I'm necessarily looking for, but it is what it is. It happens. Since we've already covered over Mega Absol, we will be jumping into Liam Halliburton's Zoroark. Zoroark is probably one of the most interesting position deck that we've ever seen in the Pokemon TCG history. It seems like Liam Halliburton and a select few of his friends are the only players who see success with Zoroark. Sure, we've seen Piper play this deck, see some success. There's been a handful of other players, but really it seems like Liam Halliburton's taken the torch. There was only 9 Zoroark players in all of day 2. When it comes to our massive day 2 with over 600 players, maybe even 700 players at EUIC. That's big enough, bigger than some major tournaments elsewhere in the world. That being said, his Zoroark list is probably the correct way to be playing it. If you're looking to kind of like play the best version of the deck in the current metagame. Going forward, I think that we're probably going to see not a lot of Zoroark because the deck seems to be not really that popular. The players who are making day 2 with the deck aren't really advancing too far, unless of course they're a player like Christian Labella, one of Liam's friends who's having it. So we see Liam, Halliburton, Christian Labella, Vinny Fernandez playing it, all seeing success. And then the rest of the players, I mean, sure, you can make day 2 with the deck. However, the deck does finish quite low in comparison. Going from 27th to 172nd is the same thing. If you look at Sydney, we see 56, 113, 31, 50, 170th. So sure, these might be some players that have played the deck multiple times before, and they might be the Zoroark mains. It really seems like Liam Halliburton, Christian Labella, Vinny Fernandez, Piper Lapine are just some of the select few that have really taken this deck to that level. Moving on, we see Makani Tran as the top placing Gardevoir player. I think Gardevoir is going to probably stay about the same position. You can see a lot of players have been playing this deck, and we can see right here, it's just straight Gardevoir was the most successful version of Gardevoir. Now, it's always a debate. Is it better to play Jelly Guardy? Is it better to play Gardevoir without Jellicent? Either way, they're playing a Frillish nowadays. I think that this version of the deck is just like really aggressive when it comes to those luxurious capes. You could really do some cool things with Screamtail. You could really make some cool Frillish plays, especially with the extra HP. And of course, there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to Gardevoir. Gardevoir is probably the absolute best deck in format when it comes down to players who know what they're doing. The only issue is the players that are playing Gardevoir seem to be light years ahead of the players who know exactly what they're doing. And I'll kind of prove it to it when it comes here. Look, so if we click on Gardevoir the same way that we clicked on anything else, we can see Makani, Brent Tonneson, Ian Robb, Cal Connor, Grant Madley, it's Isaiah Bradner, Daiji Shimeda, Henry Chow, Brian DeVries, Pedro Pertusi, and it goes on, and that's only into the top 64. If we go down a little bit more, we can see that there's other players like John Ang who are seeing success, and it goes down and down and down and down and down. And obviously someone could have a rough day too, regardless, but you can see that other players like Brent Tonneson, Ian Robb, Cal Connor, Isaiah Bradner all played the version of the deck that plays Jelly Guardy. Now, if we look into the version that Isaiah Bradner played, I believe it's the same version. Oh, I was actually looking for a different version here. I thought they played the same version that played Elgin. If we look towards, I think Henry Chow might have made it. Henry Chow, right there, cool. Definitely missed the Gardevoir goat. You can see that he played Jealous and Gardevoir, and they played Elgin. Elgin allowing them to move energies when it comes, specifically what I was told is for the Dragapult matchup, so you can move energies over to like a Badoo or something like that, and they can't really do anything. I thought it's cool tech, but I think we're probably going to see this card get yanked out of it. They did end up cutting, I believe it was the Lily's Clefairy for that card. I'm a personal fan of Lily's Clefairy, but also I'm not the Gardevoir expert in-house. I would expect to see players play one of the top lists from the event. I wouldn't be surprised if they played the version that Makani Trans played, because if you see all the players who have made day 2 with this deck, definitely a lot of players who have seen success with this deck. And as we go on to other versions, if they don't like that version, they could play Brent Tonneson's version, Ian Robb's version, Cal Connor's, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So there's always a lot of reference points when it comes to Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir is going to be about appropriately positioned as it was before. So if we think about like regular Guardy being like something like 5 to 6% and Jelly Guardy being about 5 to 6%, probably going to be about 12% in day 1 overall, maybe to 12 to 15 range, 10 to 15 range. And then day 2, we're probably going to see it rise a little bit better because players consistently do well with the deck, and the best players are playing Gardevoir. There's some other decks here too. We see Oscar Madsen, one of the cooks in the metagame. They played Dragapult Charizard. Dragapult Charizard being able to take advantage of both Phantom Dive, using energy acceleration from Infernal Rain, and of course having access to Burning Darkness to increase damage. Being Dark type gives you some options. This deck's kind of a middle of the road approach when it comes to the metagame, which might mean that you have some decent matchups in the spread. Now, if we look towards Acerola's Mischief, you can only use this card if your opponent has 2 or fewer prize cards remaining. Choose one of your Pokemon and play during your opponent's next turn. Prevent all damage counters from an effects of attacks done to that Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon EX. This card, I was often questioning how it would ever get used, but in a lot of ways, it might just end up being to be like you have one Dragapult in play, the rest of your Pokemon are single prize cards. You're like, cool, I'm going to use Acerola's Mischief on our 2 prize card Pokemon. They can't knock it out, and we're good to go. Same thing with the Charizard. Might be better in those matchups like when you're playing against a Gholdengo deck, where they're forced to go on even prize cards. They're ready to draw their last 2, and you're like, actually, you're not. I'm forcing you to draw 1. We're really good to go from there. Unfair Stamp definitely can be unfair, and it's kind of a predecessor for what we have for our post-rotation format, where a lot of players are just going with Unfair Stamp as the main ace spec. Being able to ruin your opponent's hand and lock them out of the game is really cool. That's really where this deck sees success. Some pretty cool cooking with Acerola's Mischief. I don't think this deck's necessarily going to be too popular. However, in the younger age divisions such as seniors, a lot of players seem to be playing Dragapult Charizard a little bit more often and seeing a lot more success. From what I've been told, it's due to a lack of seniors really participating in Gardevoir, therefore making the deck a little bit better to see success. And of course, any deck that has dark type attackers might be okay into Gardevoir. As we scroll down, we see Jackson Ford, fellow Canadian, my ex-local from Toronto. Well, I mean, they used to be from a different part of Canada. Now I think they're going to Toronto for school, or maybe they just live there now. Cooking it up with Charizard. Charizard, Wellspring, Pidgeot, kind of every single tech card that you could ever think of when it comes to here. Just going to scroll down so you can see the energies. It's 1 water and 1 jet energy there. And always feel free to check out the description where I'll have links to all these decks so you can copy and paste them right into PTCG Live. You can see that Charizard and is going to be the star of the show here. We're able to use either our Wellspring, Ogerpon, or our Terrapagos to kind of get these Noctowl combos out there. You can search for whatever you want. And yeah, sure, it's a heavy combo based deck, but you can use Dawn plus all these cards to make sure you get everything out that you want. If you go first, it's great. If you go second, it's okay. And the deck can definitely prosper, draw extra prize cards. There's a lot of cool things you could do with Dusknoir plus Wellspring into a Charizard, using Klefki to stop your opponent's side deck or anything else like that. There's a lot of cool things that you can do. That being said, I think that this deck's probably going to see a little bit less play, because if we look at towards the Charizard variants overall, Charizard did not necessarily see, like, it started to drop down really quickly. And the players who were playing this deck, we saw that Michael Bio played the exact same list as Jackson Ford, as we can see. Maybe I'm just clicking wrong here. The list, Michael Bio played the exact same list. So if we kind of scroll back down there, the players there typically are not leaning towards Charizard, and they started falling into that rough bracket of the day too. Now, top to 256 is still a great accomplishment. However, it's not necessarily the placement that every single player is looking for. I think Charizard's going to be well positioned in the metagame, but it's probably losing its spot in the top 5 decks towards Mega Absol Box. So any kind of share that Charizard had, I think Mega Absol Box is going to kind of try to gobble that to be within the top 4 decks. Charizard and decks like Dragapult Charizard are probably going to be below the 4th place deck. So in terms of like meta share, Charizard is probably going to be like the 5th most played deck. Dragapult Charizard might be not really played too much. And then we like kind of see that the metagame's like really much the same. We did see that there's Frostlass Monkey Dory. This is kind of going to be similar when it comes down to the Grimmsnarl deck. Players are playing this because there's some decent opportunities to kind of trap your opponent, considering they might think you're playing Grimmsnarl. You might not necessarily like know what you're getting into. Seems like placing damage counters on all your opponent's Pokemon is quite a good strategy. And it might just end up working with Technical Machine de-evolution. There are quite a few evolution-based decks, quite a few decks that have abilities, and if there's players that don't know how to play against this could be a pretty good deck. Definitely a sleeper pick, but also a low percentage deck that we're going to probably see as we go forward. And then really our next deck we see is Yurko Valencia, really putting the Raging Bolt deck on the map. They've taken this deck and really ran with it, and I think it's one of those cases where Dragapults can be a bit of a tough matchup sometimes, but maybe Wellspring solves it. It's not really like the Raging Bolt decks of yesteryears, and I think there's enough fans of Raging Bolt where people are going to play it, but at the same time, I think we're going to see that this deck's not going to pop off a crazy bit. We might see players like Yurko continuously play this deck, and we might see a few of them at Seattle. However, I don't think it's like necessarily going to be a large portion of the metagame. The rest of the metagame kind of falls off really quickly there. You can see that like we've entered into the top 32 territory, and that's kind of where you can see like Dragapult, Gardevoir, Gholdengo, Charizard, and Mega Absol Box really rip up the top 5. When it comes to Marnie's Grimmsnarl, you can see some other players who played this deck. You can see like Anil, you can go down the rest of the list. So if we go to Asaki's list right here, you can see like a lot of it's going to be really similar across the board. You got those Spike Myth gyms. It seems like those results for Grimmsnarl are like going to be very similar. Most lists are not playing Toadscroll because that's not really solving the Gholdengo matchup nearly as much as people think it does. And that's really where our metagame kind of falls flat. I think Grimmsnarl is probably going to be a little bit less popular as the metagame goes forward. And decks like Crustle are now getting into the position anything after Raging Bolt, Crustle, Alakazam, Mega Kangaskhan's are all very few decks that we're going to see in day 2. And as you can see, Zoroark's another deck that's coming 9th place. So it's one of those things where the decks are often just going to be kind of changing things up. So that's the metagame for EUIC. If we look towards like anything just to kind of recap before the end of the video, Dragapult and Gholdengo probably prove to be the most played decks. Those decks are really easy to get behind the driver's seats, and whether they're mastering or not, it's one of those things where Gholdengo and Dragapult are really the decks that they get the people going. The Raging Bolts of yesteryears. Those are the most popular decks. I think Gholdengo is probably going to be the most popular deck, if not Dragapult's. Those decks are going to be 1 and 2 going into this weekend, which is Seattle Regionals. I think the third place is probably going to be Mega Absol Box. That deck seems like it's going to pick up a lot of popularity. However, I could see players putting in Charizard or the combined Gardevoir decks, depending on how they categorize the decks. Any of the decks in the top 5 are going to be quite popular, and then it's really going to fall off between Marnie's, Grimmsnarl, Raging Bolt, and then it's probably going to be others, unless, of course, there's a local kind of spike. Now, I know that Seattle does have Tabletop Village. Sometimes they all play the same deck, and they've played some wacky decks before, like Toad Screw EX. Maybe if that's the case, and we had a large portion of locals that are working on a secret deck, we could see it spike the graphic. However, don't really expect too much else. Other decks like Flareon, Emma Hagen, not really seeing as much success with the deck at EUIC, and other decks like Slowking just end up being the memes are the dreams kind of decks. Decks like Ho Armor Rouge are really great if you run into Gholdengo, but can suffer against other poor matchups. So that's the metagame as we go forward into Seattle and how we've kind of seen EUIC shape up. Unfortunately, our Phantasmal Flames metagame has fallen a little bit stale. However, there are little tech cards here and there with players playing Dragapult Dusknoir, and then they're seeing techs with like rare candy and such. So it's one of those things where like there's always iterations of the deck that are going on there. But however, most versions of the deck of Dragapult Dusknoir are probably going to end up looking similar to what Sarah's played at EUIC. I think most lists are going with this 4-4-3, 2-2-1, 2-Badoo, where a lot of these lists have already seen previous success and they're going to end up being cookie cutter decks. For me, I'll be at Seattle, so if you end up seeing me, be sure to come up and say hi. Totally down to always have a conversation, sign a card, take a picture, and of course, chat Pokemon. If you're looking to improve in the game, I do offer coaching, so hit me up at metafy.gg/@ZachLasage. All the links are available in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll catch up with y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed the content that we have today, and maybe you'll click on one of these other videos, enjoy those videos too. If you haven't already, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what video you want to watch next. Until next time, we'll catch up with all y'all later. Have yourself a great day.